Okay, so we're live on the Facebook pages, just waiting on YouTube. Just bear with us 1 second. Okay, there's YouTube. All right, so we're good. We're live on Facebook and YouTube. We got Ethann Fox in the house. I'm going to put on our intro and allow people time to come in, then share out to the network, and we'll be back in about a minute and a half with Ethann Fox. How's it going, everybody? We've got Ethann Fox in the house. We got a powerful week we've been having on Soul Speaks 5D. It must be somewhat representative of what's going on in the energetic fields, but we're having quite a few powerful divine feminines on this week. We still got Amanda Lawrence, Judith Cassell, Mary Rodwell, Magenta Pixie, Michaela Sheldon, Sandra Walter, Michelle Aguino, and her partner Jesse. But we also have Ethann Fox, and so what better way to support this this week with all this divine feminine energy really coming to the surface now than to have a balanced masculine like Ethann Fox on. So let's get him up here and see what's happening in his world. Let's see. There we go. Hey, Ethann, what's going on?
How are you?
I'm doing good. It's God, a lot's happened since the last time we talked.
Yeah.
So I know you're always in that work mode. You're doing your thing every day. What's it been like over there?
Nothing's really changed. I mean, we haven't changed anything really. We've actually continued to have our events every month, like always, and just my life is pretty much the same as it always is. So nothing new.
Yeah, business as usual.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people are like, oh, they've got us in quarantine, and and the short version of it is, well, we've been doing this all along. We've been spending time by ourselves, thinking about what's going on. Pulling ourselves out of old patterns and behaviors.
Yeah, my life is. I mean, I mostly work from home anyway, but we have actually continued to hold our public events throughout the whole thing. We haven't really.
Oh, you have.
Mm-hmm.
You mean in right there in the city where you're at?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So have people come?
Well, in March we had a very small turnout. I think maybe 6 or 7 people, so not very many. But in April we had a fair amount of people come. So I think it's kind of a sign people are getting a little bit less afraid and setting out at that point. And we have an event coming up next weekend as well.
That seems to be a good indicator, though. I'm kind of amazed watching everything over these last few weeks, and that there's not more, spinning out and acting out. It seems like, maybe it's just me, but when I look at the field and when I see, as I walk down to the store or whatever, people don't seem to be, freaking out about this. It's almost like everybody's appreciating the reset.
Well, it depends on the area, really. I mean, in some areas, people are a little bit more stressed out, but it has gotten better since the beginning. I think a lot of people have sort of settled into a better understanding and of what's going on, and so they've. I think many people are a bit more relaxed about it. So, but it depends on the region of the world. Some parts of the world are more suppressed than others.
Yeah, that's very true. And has the this unfoldment of all these events since the last time we talked, has it affected? It hasn't affected you doing your stuff online or even there locally, but has it altered anything at all in terms of what you're putting out there? I mean, has it been like a complementing type of frequency or occurrence?
Well, I live in a slightly different reality than most people, I think. So because of that, there has been no effect on anything that we're doing.
Yeah.
So we've just kept to whatever we had planned all along,
Yeah.
and all the same programs have happened. Everything's right on schedule as usual. So nothing, we still have our expo planned for this year. We have our kids retreat coming up in July. Nothing has been altered at all.
Yeah. And after everything you've been through, you've discussed this on previous shows, like your whole experience waking up and all the things that you deal with and have experienced. Do you feel like these events that are occurring or that have occurred are supporting a collective expansion of the consciousness? Do you feel like it's supporting us or working against us?
Well, I think ultimately it's supporting us. I think we're eventually heading into a more enlightened future. But in the meantime, I mean, I think this time we're in now was prophesied throughout, ancient prophecies, and we knew this was coming. This is why we're here. This is why you're here doing what you're doing, and all the other people who are becoming more awakened during this time. This is why we chose this time, because it was going to be this pivotal shift to a higher consciousness. But in the meantime, that's coming about through a lot of difficulties and the purging or processing of a lot of density. So I think that's what we're seeing right now is that period of time. And in the midst of all of this, a lot of people are becoming aware and awakened to the reality in which they live. So, I mean, if only just a few months ago, a lot of people didn't realize how the world really worked. And I think more and more people are coming to that realization now.
Yeah.
So in the long run, I think this is essential to our progress. And I think to the same degree that this event has caused difficulty around the world, we're going to see the same degree of awakening on the other side as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And even though I said what I said, there's still a lot of what is the word? Enhancement to our own stuff. Like people looking at their stuff because they have been pulled out of their routines and patterns and behaviors, and there's at home self-introspection, that type of thing. And there is some fluctuation in me included, in people coming face to face with their own stuff as a result of what's happened collectively. And maybe it's a time to start re-emphasizing some of these methods that have been put out there by so many people like yourself, are places to go anyway, to come into further alignment and to greater realization, because there's a lot of that going on right now, I think. And there's a lot of people, even in the lightwork communities, that are really, kind of in a state of self-righteousness, or, and this whole thing about losing the things that we thought were our identities. I mean, there's a lot of little deaths going on out there. So I think it's a good time to start re-emphasizing some of these modalities and processes to bring us into alignment. Have you noticed any of that type of stuff going on, or are you in your bubble?
Well, I think we all experience life from our own vantage point. So if we have areas where we are normally blocked or where we normally are challenged, those are the areas that are going to become first and foremost in our experience when times like this happen. I mean, it's when you go through life, when times are easy, your difficult spots or difficult areas of your experience don't really show up that much, or they don't cause much of a problem. It's when challenges come that you realize where there are areas you can improve. So I think, I mean, sure, that's going on everywhere. And even I've noticed this across the board, not just in the mainstream, but certainly with people who are in the spiritual space as well, who are experiencing those areas also. So, I mean, for me personally, nothing much has changed other than, I mean, I'm even more aware of how much work there is yet to do,
Right.
because of what happened in the last couple of months. So in that perspective, I've noticed a difference, because and I knew this time was coming. And in fact, even last year I was talking about the astrology of this time, but I didn't, it was no way to really know the breadth of how things would actually play out. So in a sense, this was always meant to happen right now, and it was always going to happen right now. And so we just have to go through it. But now walking it in my human experience, I didn't expect it to be quite as extreme as it was, as it has turned out anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a few people that have come on the show have said the same thing. I knew it was going to go down, but I didn't know it was going to go down like this, and I'm a little bit shocked by it. So yeah, I mean, this is. I was on a show previous to this one with Laura, and she said something about, this whole virus thing hits the throat and the lungs, and that basically, long story short, that where there is the emphasis placed is actually where our opportunity is. And so it's a very important time, for instance, like in this example, to speak out, to speak your truth, to step up. And I just thought that, well, that's kind of cool. But that's how the universe works. It's like, we're going to give you this to transform into that. And yeah, but I do think there's a lot to be said for people standing up and stepping into their power now, particularly the feminine seems to really be rising at this moment.
Well, I think what this event has caused is, in some ways, and you might, in some ways you might think this is a bad thing, but it's sort of caused a splitting between humanity in many ways. I mean, you can see splits happening between family members, and splits in relationships, and just splits in society as a whole, and people on one side of the fence and people on the other side of the fence. So, and then the thing is, it's sort of like we're experiencing life from subtly different realities, in some cases, very dramatically different realities. So everybody is going to be a little bit different in terms of how they experience that. I mean, there is the side of things where people are very much afraid of a virus, and they're in extreme fear, and they're hiding in their homes right now. And then there's the other side where people believe that the virus isn't real, or that it's fabricated and it's not such a big deal. And those people are fighting for their rights. So we have this polarity in society right now that's happening within individual families and relationships. So what that's showing us is, well, I think all those realities are real for the people who are experiencing them. And so in a way, it's sort of a split of timelines that's occurring in our reality, where there are people who are living in one entirely different reality than the other. People, for example, if you go to your average grocery store in our area, everybody's wearing masks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like walking into, a dystopic, apocalyptic society. But then there are the rest of us who really aren't in fear and just going about our lives as usual. So we have this sort of split that's taking place. And so everybody is getting whatever they're getting from wherever they are, from their own attunement to different vibrational realities. True. So I don't think we can look at any one person's experience as being the experience, because everybody's having their own from wherever they're tapping into consciousness.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, you got that one extreme of, walking into the twilight zone at the grocery store, and then the other extreme is this doesn't exist. And the truth is, both ends of the polarity, both ends of the spectrum do exist, and everything in between. So it's kind of interesting to me, like, how's this going to play out? You know, I mean, I could see it clearing up. I could see it having a resurgence. But regardless, it seems like these energies are the consequences, I guess, of the virus energetically is supporting us. You know, it's actually kind of cool because it's forcing us to look, you know, spend some time with ourselves and to really, you know, like you said, people are starting to think. Just a few months ago, they didn't have the insight they do right now. Hey, wait a minute, this thing doesn't exactly work the way that I thought it did. You know, so it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out. You picked you know, in talking to us previously in, you know, in the work that you do, you had a very well-rounded, you know, embodied set of, you know, experiences at the higher levels, bringing them down to the human level. You have your work that you're doing, which you've really, you know, you've really made some great progress over the years. And you told us about how tough it was when you started and all that. Do you, is there a part of you that's like, it's finally happening? It's finally going down. Are you getting excited yet?
I wouldn't say that. No, I mean, it's not really that different for me than it was before. I didn't have any excitement over this happening. It was in some ways a little bit discouraging that society is where it is. If anything, I think this showed me how, you know, as I said earlier, how much work there is still to do.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get excited over it or experience anything else as far as that it's finally here. But I think in a couple of years, it may take a few years before we get to the other side of this. But
Yeah.
but when we do, I think we're going to start emerging into a much brighter society and a much more conscious society as a result of this. So on the one hand, this isn't a very pleasant time for most people, and the repercussions of this, which will be much bigger than this event itself, are going to last for a little while. So on the one hand, doesn't seem so positive, but on the other hand, in a way, because of where we find ourselves as a collective at this time, an event like this was necessary in order for us to move forward in another direction. I mean, there is a certain consciousness that has been, I don't want to say in control, but essentially managing the experiences of human beings for some time. And that consciousness is orchestrating, or rather, in some way, that lower vibrational consciousness is bringing about these experiences. So many people now, because of this, are starting to realize that on different levels. I mean, some people realize it in a very simple level or very 3D level, such as there are government leaders who are doing nefarious things, and other people are realizing it at a much more cosmic level, and some people realize it on all levels. But at the end of the day, it was just going to happen right now, and there's nothing to be done about it other than we will evolve through this and come out the other side.
Yeah. And then I look at, like, you know, if I go back to your work again, you know, you're kind of building this platform of education, of, like, let's say 5D or higher frequency education. And then you find yourself in a situation where everybody's now staying home to be schooled. So it's working. And that's what I was getting at. It's almost like there's, like you said, some people look at it this way, some people look at it that way, but it looks like, you know, some of the things people like you have been doing as a result of these things are actually playing right into your hands, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and I noticed that a lot of my life seems to operate in synchronicity. The right people show up just when I need them, and the right, you know, we're working on the right projects just at the right time. That doesn't mean we don't make mistakes here and there, or head in a direction and decide to abandon that or turn it into something else from time to time. But on the whole, that's true. And we do have other projects too that we were planning on launching. When we spoke last time, we were not planning on launching them because it was something I was going to put off for a couple of years. But in light of the circumstances, we decided to start working on those now.
Yeah, there you go.
So other things that are also in the works that really are timely with what's going on in the world.
Yeah. And have you had any, like any elevations in communication, like with your higher self or your team, or any, strong intel come in, any strong feelings of, wow, this is going the right direction. Yes, these synchronicities are happening. Yes, you weren't going to do that, but now given the circumstances, let's go for it. I mean, are you feeling any more synchronicity or validation more than you did in the past?
Well, I don't claim to be a channel or an intuitive. So, although, obviously we're all channels and intuitives to some degree or another, but because I'm surrounded by so many talented channels and intuitives, I wouldn't, if you put me on a deserted island, then I would probably call myself a channel. But
Yeah.
considering I'm surrounded by people like Michaela and Barb and other people like that, um, they're really gifted more in that area. But I will say, I mean, I obviously am an astrologer and I follow the cycles, and this is something that I use to navigate my own journey. And not only do I have a sense of what I'm to do or what I'm going to be doing next, but I also kind of have a perspective on what's going on in the broader scope of the world. So from that standpoint, I mean, I think we're exactly where we need to be, and the things that are happening now are going to happen and meant to happen. So a lot of the things that we have planned are in alignment with that. So a lot of times, like, I will plan things around when things are supposed to come into being in my own life or in our projects. So like our kids program and such, there's a reason why we are working on it for a certain amount of time before launching it. I just have a perspective on when those things are meant to come into being. So yeah, I mean, I do have that sense, but I am surrounded by lots of very talented intuitives and channels and whatnot, and they are also very much in line with that. And I think a lot of people in this time are going to come into their higher intuition as well, just because in this process, so much density is going to be released through the suffering that people are going through, that many people are going to start becoming aware of their own connection to the universe or their own spiritual gifts and things like that.
Yeah, I wonder how long that's going to take to go into the mainstream.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at, because, well, I don't know if this has happened with you, but because we are online publishers and we stream videos and YouTube and different kinds of social media platforms and such, I'm very well aware of how much censorship is taking place on media platforms these days. But what's interesting is these videos that are being censored are getting millions of views in some cases.
Yeah.
So that can't be just us. That has to be a mainstream audience. And those viewerships are getting bigger and bigger while they're being censored. So that tells me that the mainstream is starting to catch on to these ideas, and that expansion of awareness is increasing during this time. So one thing that's very 3D that encourages me that we are heading in the right direction is the fact that censorship is increasing so much every day, but at the same time, viewership of these alternative viewpoints is also increasing exponentially.
Yeah, that's very true. And again, another good byproduct of the quarantine is, and I'm sure it's been that way for for you guys and a lot of people that are out there putting this stuff on online, is the audience is growing more. I mean, people are at home, so they're tuning in more, and so that means that the word's spreading faster.
Yeah, I think that was an unintended consequence of censorship that maybe those who are doing the censoring didn't realize is because of everyone being stuck at home right now. That actually has resulted in more people having access to these alternative ideas, and doing things like yoga and meditation and things that they ordinarily would never have done, which is actually increasing and expanding awareness and of the reality in which we live. So inside every challenge we've been facing is actually some positive benefit that's also coexisted with it. So this is not, we can't look at this as black and white entirely, because there is also, anytime there's a problem in the universe, there's also a solution that exists at the same time.
Yeah.
And I also often talk about how anytime we've gone through a really difficult time in our society, the seed of opportunity is always present at the same time. Just like the last time we had a financial collapse on the planet, which also was orchestrated at the same time back then, was in 2008. And many people got angry and they protested on Wall Street and all over the world. And the protests really didn't result in much of anything. But at the same time, cryptocurrency was born in 2008. So cryptocurrency was the solution to the financial collapse, and ultimately maybe what moves us in a positive direction to a more fair financial system. So in the same way, I think right now we may not know what it is yet, or what the things are that will spring from this time that will actually move us in a positive direction. But while all of this is going on, there are people in the world who are doing things that are going to, in a few years, emerge to the world as the solution to all of these problems that we're facing.
Yeah, right on. And like to your point too, I just wonder sometimes, just because I have a curious mind, how much of this stuff has already been decided in the energetic field? Like there's just seems to be too much momentum for there not to be that force driving it. Like like even in what you talked about with Occupy Wall Street. I mean, yeah, those didn't do too well, but energetically something occurred, and the cryptocurrency came out, and that continues to expand. But I just wonder how long is it going to be before we energetically make a choice and then we see the direct physical manifestation of it?
Well, I think that's happening now, but when will we see it publicly? Like cryptocurrency it's been out about 11 years now, so it's taken about that long for us to be able to see it in any significant way, but it was there from 2009 or 2008. So I think there are things that are being born now. We don't maybe know that they exist yet. I think it'll probably be a few years before we see it, just based on the cycles. So I mean, I look at astrology, and of course, and I think even Michaela has channeled this at events. Her timing when she channels is roughly the same as what I see in the astrology cycles. So about 2 to 3 years is when we're going to come out from under this, and that's when we'll start to see the many things that were born at this time that we can't see right now. And those things are going to move us toward a better society.
Yeah, right on. Right. It's going to be interesting to see how it all rolls out.
Yeah.
Now, you said you've got something coming up on Saturday. We didn't talk too much about we did talk a little bit about what you do on these previous shows, but I wanted to go into it a little bit deeper. But can you just give us an idea what's going down Saturday at your place?
Well, it's a week from this Saturday. We do an event here every month that's a physical event. We also live stream it on Facebook. So it's our Flower of Life Institute event. And this Saturday, it's going to be basically it's Michaela channels and speaks for a couple of hours and takes questions. So since we live stream it, we take questions from online as well as the people who are physically there. And then I do a 2-hour event. It's an energy transfer. So basically raising consciousness and removing density. And Barb may be there this time as well. Barb, for if you don't know who she is, she's an aura reader. So she can see the energy fields of people in the room. So she's usually there observing the room while I'm doing the energy process. So we're doing that. We don't have a third. Most of the time these days we have a third speaker, but because of the circumstances right now, we've sort of rescheduled them in later in the month. So in June we do have the same thing, but we have a speaker coming out. Her name is Elia, and she's a physician, and she's going to be speaking about, for one thing, the virus, and she's actually an infectious disease specialist. So she used to work with pharmaceutical companies developing vaccines, and her expertise was infectious diseases. So so she's going to be speaking from her background about what she believes is going on, and also now she's developing a new healing practice that is a blend between conventional medicine and using more advanced technology as well as vibrational medicine. And she's had really great success with patients who are untreatable in the conventional system.
Wow.
So anyway, she's sort of creating this whole new healing modality that is sort of an advanced medicine. And so she has an interesting perspective because she comes from that mainstream field of infectious disease medicine, and she is developing it to a level where it's more multidimensional medicine compared to what it was before. So she'll be speaking next month. Assuming that our video doesn't get censored, it'll be on YouTube and Facebook.
But that's what it's going to take. I think it's going to take people who have, career knowledge, career knowledge, and then they make the conversion or they make the transformation. Because, you can have, for instance, if it's medical, non-doctors, talking about this and talking about that, and they can be shot down one way or the other. But if it's somebody who's actually been in the industry, who actually knows infectious diseases like in this, and who's actually gone in and done the cryptocurrency thing, basically, she's planting the seeds, and that's one of those things that's probably going to come out in 2 or 3 years is one of the solutions.
Yeah.
You talk about energy transfer. You spend a couple hours doing that. What is that? Is that like a meditation, like a walkthrough meditation, or exercise of some sort?
No, it's it's something that I do that's unique to me, and so I don't know how deeply you want to get into that. It's a big topic, but basically, I came to realize about 7 or 8 years ago that I had this ability and that it had been operating in the background of my life, my entire life. I've lived a very unusual, I should say I've lived a normal life, but a lot of unusual things have happened throughout my life that when I was younger, didn't have any reference point and no one in my life to really explain what was going on. So I just kind of dismissed a lot of those experiences and put them on the shelf. So it wasn't until recent years that, meeting people like Barb and Michaela and others put all the pieces together as to what was going on. So about 7 years ago, I did this event in our local area at a local library just as an experiment to see what would happen. And essentially what I'm doing is this physical body, I call it a physical structure, is walking in 2 dimensions all the time. So it is walking in the 3rd dimension, but it's also walking in the 13th dimension. So it can essentially, you might say, it's anchored in both dimensions. And because of that, communication can happen between both dimensions. So there is a collective of beings on the 13th dimension, many ascended masters and extraterrestrial consciousnesses and such, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, so on. And they utilize this physical structure, physical body, to move energy back and forth from that dimension. So when we do an event, part of what takes place is that 13th dimensional collective is channeling an energy through this physical body to all the people in the room, or people who are watching the video online as well. And that essentially raises that person's consciousness and vibration. It can expand their energy field. And that's where Barb's in the room helping. She can see that happening in real time. So she can see the energy coming from me to everybody in the room. She can see everybody's auras expanding and the after effects of doing this. And it was really her coming into my life years ago that prompted me to do this event to see what was actually happening. Now, at the same time, I ask everyone in the room to send their density to me. So that, basically our multidimensional bodies, or our physical bodies as well, we carry a certain energetic density. Now, the reason there's so much suffering and fear in the world right now is because as a collective, there's a lot of density that we've built up. But individually, we also have that. And that density is something that oftentimes may take a lifetime or lifetimes to process. But just an ability that I've come into this life with is the ability to take that density on for someone else so that they don't have to carry it forward. So I ask everybody in the room and who's watching online to send that density to me. Now Barb's watched this happen and over our events over the years, and she says what happens is she'll see this dark cloud of energy coming from everybody in the room or online when we've done it as a virtual event, and it disintegrates as it hits my energy field. But then the person no longer has that density in their energy field. So it tends to create a radical shift in consciousness and also a lighter way of being. So a greater sense of joy and peace in life. And many people, for some people, it may take more than one instance, but everybody shifts timelines. So as an example, a lot of people around me, their lives change very dramatically shortly after we meet, just because this energy is always present and it's always working in the background, even if I'm not consciously trying to do something with it. So it's really more about helping people during this time to make this shift in consciousness and vibration without having to suffer through it like we are as a collective right now.
Wow. That's a very unique. I've obviously seen people, working with, a local crowd in a setting like that, doing certain things, but I've never heard of what you just explained. It's a unique skill, ability. So there's a few comments here just so everybody can kind of get a feel for it too. Joan Kirkendall says he blasts people. It's profound. Candace Coe, our friend from Canada, she says, I have experienced Ethann's abilities, which help make me aware of my own. It looks like he's just sitting there, but oh no. It's wonderful. It clears. So obviously this is something that people have been, people have resonated with. You said you did it as a test or an experiment. Well, how long ago was that? Like 3 years ago?
About 7 years ago.
Oh, 7 years ago.
Yeah, 6 or 7 years ago. It was something that I've had signs throughout my life was going on, but I had no reference. Now, even when I was in my 20s, I had interest in spirituality, and I even was around a lot of very gifted channels, even when I was younger. And they would tell me that I was going to do something like this in the future. But at that point, I was just living a pretty normal life. But there were weird things that were happening around me, though, even though I was living a normal life that I had no understanding of. But all these years later, looking back, and of course, I've had Michaela channel for me on the whole situation. And I've had Barb look at pictures of me when I was a child, and she sees my energy field looking exactly the same back then as it does now. So between the two, what I've come to realize, this has been going on since birth, that this 13th dimensional collective has been utilizing this physical body to facilitate this wherever I've been without me knowing. And later channeling with Michaela, I was able to speak to them, to ask them questions about, why do I do this? And, what's my background, things like that. Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's almost like you're some type of monad or something, something. So when you connected to this 13th dimensional energy complex, was it, did you get anything that just kind of shocked you? I mean, was it ordinary? I mean, did you get anything that you didn't already know? Because I think at some level you must have known all of this.
Well, sorry. I suppose when I started doing this as an experiment about 6 or 7 years ago, the idea was something that just I already knew. I already knew that I could do it, but I wanted to do it as an experiment with Barb there to prove to myself that I knew what I thought I knew. But I already had a sense of the process. So when we did our very first experiment, it's exactly the same way as I do it today.
Wow.
After all these years of experience, because I already kind of had a sense of what was going on, just because at that time I put together all the pieces of things that had happened in my life and realized that this was happening. So, and when I met Barb, she came to one of our events that we had years ago, and for the first time, and she mentioned to me that my energy field was different from any she'd seen before. So it made me take a look at that and think, well, if what she's saying is true, and then all these things that have happened in my life now makes sense. And that means I should do something with that. It can't be there by accident. So that's what prompted me to do the experiment. So when I met Michaela about 6 or 8 months later, I met both of them, I think pretty much within the same year. And she started, channeling. We started practicing together, and she channeled for me at a certain point, and I had a chance to speak to this collective. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say there. They are a 13th dimensional collective. I'm a part of that collective, and so on the 13th dimension, I'm also there, or my soul, or my multidimensional self, you might say. At the same time, I'm also here on the third dimension. So this facilitation of energy happens between those two levels. There is a consciousness that on that dimension that goes by King of Kings, that is a being who sort of facilitates this process. There is also a being who Michaela and Barb see around me all the time. He's a tall, bearded man, and who is always next to me. So he's probably here right now. I don't see him, but they can see him. And he facilitates the process on this end. Wow. And now he apparently has been my teacher through many incarnations. And so he's with me as a guide in this one. But I also, in speaking to this collective, so I asked them questions like, well, why don't you just do it yourself? Why do you need me here? And they said that because they're on a 13th dimension, they can't interact with the third dimension directly. So they needed somebody here who could function between both dimensions and allow this process to happen. So as a soul, I went through certain education or training to be able to do this in this life, and this physical body had to be a certain way to be able to do this in this life. And so because of that, I'm able to do it. But I also have lineage to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, which is why this ability exists, is a connection to that timeline, where the biblical timeline that they shared, I was also there, and that was and that training is still in me now. So there's a lot more to say, but those are some of the details.
No, that's very cool. And so, like, when you do this in front of a group, I get the impression that you may not do as much talking as what you might see traditionally. Some people, saying, this is what I'm going to do. Da, 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 da. Somebody made the comment that it looks like he's just sitting there doing nothing, but it's, oh, no, 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 no. I mean, so is there a lot of telepathic frequency going on? I mean, do you even have to think about what you're doing consciously, or does it just naturally flow?
Well, first of all, I'm not doing anything. I mean, I may be doing something, but I'm not actually doing anything, because my whole, at the point that I was born into this reality, in this life, whatever I needed to be done was done, in the sense that all of the training came before this life, and the preparation came before this life. As soon as I was here, this collective was doing everything ever since. So if you look at any of our videos from events that I've done, and I encourage people to do this, to use those videos to repeat the process. So there are people all over the world who are using our YouTube videos and Facebook live streams, facilitating the energy transfer, and I don't know that they're doing it when they're doing it. But it still works, and it's still effective. And the reason is because I, the human me, does not need to be conscious of this. But on the 13th dimension, they don't perceive time or space. So if somebody on the other side of the planet decides to do this process, they will know their intention, and they will facilitate that through this physical body without me being aware of it. So I don't actually have to know or do anything in particular. When I do the events, like our live streams and our physical events, I am intentional. So I do participate intentionally in the process, and but it's not necessary that I do that. And actually, that's one of the first questions I asked them years ago, and it sort of happened accidentally. When I first started doing these events in our local area, nobody knew who I was except in our local area, a handful of people, and somehow somebody in New York found out, and I don't know how, but he reached out and said, would you be willing to do this remotely for me and my daughter? And my thought was, well, I've never done that before, but I'm up for trying as an experiment. And so we scheduled 12 dates in the month when I was going to do this. And I never missed my appointments. But for some reason, on the first appointment that we had, I was getting ready for the appointment. I fell asleep at my desk and totally missed the appointment. And I was about to email the guy telling him, I apologize, let's reschedule. And he emailed before I got to him saying what an extraordinary experience he had and it was amazing. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't want to tell him I fell asleep. So I decided not to tell him. And then a couple of days later, we had another session scheduled. And again, I fell asleep. And then the session, I was about to email him and he emailed me back before I got to him and said it was amazing. So I got with Michaela and I channeled the 13th Dimensional Collective and asked them what's going on. And they said, well, we don't really need you. We wanted you to have that experience so that you would realize that this is not about you or you doing anything. We will do all the work. You just need to physically be in this dimension. Yeah. And then they can do whatever that other person needs with that other person's intention.
Wow. So essentially anybody could lock into you with the intention that this gentleman had for him and his daughter, whether it be like one of the old videos or whatever. And because you're clear, you're that conduit, then that's what they were explaining. You're physically there, so you've already done what you need to do, other than just keep your channel clear, I guess. But yeah, I was kind of wondering about that because I was thinking, well, when you go into the room, do you even have to think of anything? Because a lot of times we get in our own way, with that whole communication thing with the higher ups. It's not human words all the time. And then many people aren't like Michaela or like Morgan. I'm more like you, and it comes in, you're like, did I hear that? That type of thing. But so you actually can go in and be present.
Yeah, I think it's more a sense of, it's more being in a state of stillness and non-resistance than anything else. I mean, anybody who's a good channel is in a state of non-resistance when they're channeling. The reason so many channels are saying different things is because some channels are not as free of resistance as other channels. And the same is true for what I do. The main thing that I need to do is to be in that state of non-resistance, and then they do the rest. So yeah, I don't have to follow any particular process. And a lot of times I'll just go somewhere and sit next to somebody without even intending to do anything, and they'll feel the energy flowing, and I'm not actually doing anything or even aware that I'm doing anything. So it's not really necessary for me to have that awareness.
And yeah, that's fascinating. And last question on that. So you mentioned this gentleman contacted you from New York. I'm just sitting here thinking, what would it be like in a one-on-one session, face-to-face? Have you ever done any like that? And is there a immediate impact?
Well, yeah, I don't generally recommend that, but and the reason is because the effects can be very severe to your life in terms of like, when I do live streams, I'm not in person, obviously. When I do them in person at events, at least people who have watched the videos and then come to physical events have said that the physical events, they feel a lot more intense. And I do have people email me from all over the world from time to time when they go through an energy transfer for the first time. All of a sudden the next day their whole life collapses, and that can happen because this can be such a big shift in your vibration that on the next day your reality cannot match the old reality anymore. So your life can completely disintegrate overnight and rebuild completely new because of the new vibration. Now, when I do this in person, in the rare cases that I have, the reaction some people have had, especially if it's the first time they've done this with me, they can be very violent. Like, because, when I do it in person, I transmit the energy. When I do it at events, I have my eyes closed and it's working that way. When I do it in person, I usually do it eye to eye and transmit the energy through my eyes. There's less resistance that way. And also, so what happens is over the years, like first time I did it years ago was with a woman who obviously had a lot of density. You can just see it in her. And so she asked me to do this, and it was at a retreat that I did that I was a part of years ago. And we went into a private room, closed the door, and I started transmitting. It's the very first time I did it through my eyes, and she just became very violent and started screaming obscenities at me, and the people in the outside of the room were about to barge in because they were concerned that she was beating me up or something. But it was just her physical body and her emotional state, her spirit were reacting so violently to the energy transmission so since that time I don't generally recommend it because, and I've had that happen a number of times over the years for the few times I've done it. Not everybody responds that way. It depends on how much density you have. If you have a lot of density, and especially I find people who have attachments, so let's say maybe a reptilian attachment or something like that, the body can respond very violently because that attachment doesn't want to let go. So in instances like that, when you're doing it in person, the intensity can be so strong that it can be uncomfortable. Hasn't happened for every person I've done that with, but the people who it hasn't happened to that extent with are people who generally are in a higher state of consciousness and vibration to begin with, and they don't have a lot of density. But yeah, I do it differently when I do it one-on-one, and it does seem to be a lot more of an impact on that person.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Hung Nguyen just took the words out of my mouth. She said like an exorcism, question mark. But I mean energetically, you know, I'm not. No, that's that's kind of got its risk for you. You may not want to be one-on-one with people in the same way.
There's no risk for me, but there's no risk for me, but the risk to somebody else, or rather it's not a risk, but just to be aware that the consequences of that kind of an intensity can be very severe. And now a lot of people want to do that and want to have that kind of a shift in their life, but I don't generally suggest it because you could wake up the next day and have to reinvent yourself, and
that's a radical.
Yeah,
you're like a node for fast track awakening, like instantaneous. Like, you know, a lot of people have had those, but to have that, I wonder how many people are like that walking the earth. You know, like how many things like this are going on around the earth that you don't hear about. You know,
there are a lot of very talented people. Obviously, I mean, I work around a lot of light workers. I see really amazing things. I think many people are coming into their higher abilities right now. In terms of what I'm doing, I did actually ask the 13th Dimensional Collective, is there anybody else that's doing what I'm doing? They did say there were 5 other people on the planet who had the capability, but I think 4 of them were children still, so they hadn't yet come into it, and the 5th one is in some small town area, so he or she is not known at this point in any sort of public way. So, but there are others who will probably be coming out in the years ahead who have similar capabilities.
Yeah, Hung says walking activator. And on that note too, because you do so much stuff locally there in the city you live in, have you seen the impact of the work that your team has done in that community, either by your own measure or maybe through Michaela or one of these channels where they can actually see the energetic field? I mean, have you seen the impact? Because it's got to be substantial. You guys have been doing that quite some time.
We have. I don't think we've ever explored that. I mean, our audience is international. When we do our expo or even our local monthly events, people often fly in. Our expo for sure is mostly people who are not from our local area. But, you know, for a long time, I had considered why we ended up here in Michigan, of all places. And I do think that Michigan will, although it doesn't seem very apparent at the moment, I do think Michigan will be one of the major hubs of consciousness on the planet in the long run. And I think that's why we found ourselves here at this time. But it may not seem very obvious right now, but I think there's a lot of spiritual activity here in Michigan. But I don't know that, to what degree we've affected that. It's not something we've really ever looked at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you would just think, I mean, it would have to, with as much energy as you guys have created, because you've been at this now really, what, 3 or 4 years?
We started, well, the organization originated around 2012, 13.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been at it since then, but, slowly building up momentum every year. Hardly anybody other than local people in the local area knew we existed in 2012, and so over time we've become more international. But yeah, since about then.
Wow. So it's a great example of what can be done, because I know from the previous shows, I mean, you went through hell. I mean, you really put, your gonads to the wall and survived it. And then I love the story because of, like what you said earlier about, these people always seem to come in when I need them or when it's time. And obviously there's a direct relationship between that and your initiative, you following your guidance. When you talk to the 13th dimensional consciousness or complex or collection, did they talk a little bit about we've been with you the whole time, or is that something you just know?
Yeah, I mean, I basically asked them because at the time this was very new to me and I didn't know what was actually happening, and I was really curious. So I did ask them about why I'm doing this, and what their role is and so on. And as I said earlier, what they told me was that I've been doing this since birth, and even though I didn't know, or rather they've been doing this since I was born without my knowledge, and they didn't need me to know. But now I'm stepping on a new phase of my journey where I can do this with more intention and in a more public way. So that's certainly the case. And so they've been with me all along. And even when I look back to my childhood now, my family's very mainstream. So there was no, I couldn't really rely on them to explain the things that were going on in my life. But even thinking back to childhood, I always had an awareness that there was somebody else there with me, but I didn't have any context or understanding of what that meant back then. So I feel like it's always been there. And now since I've met Barb and Michaela and others, I have those details and can speak to those guides and hear it from them directly. So yeah, they've been with me all along.
Far out, man. There's gonna be a lot more to this story coming out. I can feel it in my bones. I hope we can get up that way. I think we're gonna be heading out soon. I'd love to get together with you and see what's going on at a local level, because you don't see a lot of that going on. So this is big. And I look at that, I saw your picture, your cover photo with all those beautiful women around you. The energy of that picture is incredible. It doesn't
that's
even
from our
need
expo last year.
Yeah, that's just incredible, man. I was like, whoa. Yeah. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for anyone who's just joining us, you might want to go back and watch the last hour, because about 20 minutes into it, Ethann talks about what he does, which is not the only part of the event week from Saturday, but evidently he's been doing it for 7 years, and it's pretty impressive. So I'm going to tune into it because I'm off on Saturday, so that means I can tune in.
Or come out to our expo this November. I mean,
Oh, it's in November?
Our expo is in November, and it's in downtown Detroit, and that's 3 days. So it's a much more intensive vibrational experience. I'll obviously be there doing the energy transfers every day. Barb is there, Michaela's there channeling, and we'll have a number of other speakers. I mean, certainly informative, but it's really a very high vibrational event. Yeah. So the most common thing I hear from people is that it changed their life. And that's really what we're going for, is to transform people on a very high vibrational level. So
Wow.
yeah, if you can make it out to that, then that would be great.
Hey, I'm gonna I'm gonna have to write that down and let the boss know. Of course, we're just following whatever guidance we're given at the moment it's given, but that certainly resonates with me. Not that I want to be in Detroit in November, but I'd rather go in the summer. But anyway, well, thank you, Ethan. I always enjoy talking to you. Michaela's going to be on Friday. Thank you so much, your team, you, Michaela, and all the others for doing the work that you're doing, because you are setting the standard in so many ways, in so many aspects of what we're moving into. So I just want to say thanks for coming and thanks for what you do. And until the next time, I'll see you
Thank you.
later. All right. Thanks, Ethan. Bye-bye.